An Operation Ganga, in fact, to rescue stranded Indians from war-torn Ukraine is in full swing. A total of 1,396 students have been returned, in fact, to India. These students have been brought back in batches, and 6 trips have been made till now as Russia inches closer to Ukraine's strategic locations. Now, with the motto of bringing every single Indian back home, the India government has rushed 4 top ministers to the border routes near Ukraine. With the Ukrainian airspace being closed for civilian aircraft, India is evacuating its citizens through its neighboring countries, particularly those on its western side. Now, we'll tell you where the ministers will be deployed to monitor the evacuation operations. Gen VK Singh will coordinate the evacuation efforts in Poland. Kiren Rijiju will be in Slovakia and Hardeep Puri in Hungary. Jyotiraditya Scindia will be looking after the evacuation efforts from Romania and Moldova. Let's now give you a lowdown of India's Operation Ganga that has set a template for the world when it comes to evacuation operations.
The Honorable Prime Minister has decided that there is a need for some of his ministers to go, so that there is much more confidence that is instilled in people who are trying to come out. Our aim is to go there and ensure that things are smoothly handled, and we will be working on with the officials on ground so that all our people who are trying to come out, their passage is made easier.
And the Prime Minister oversees the evacuation drive. 4 ministers are supervising Operation Ganga, but Rahul Gandhi says that it's not effective. He says that students are being harassed at the borders, and students say that once, in fact, they have tried to contact officials, they've not been able to do so. In fact, a video also being tweeted there by Rahul Gandhi. All right, let's now go across to our guest joining us. We have with us S.T. Devare, former Secretary of MEA and former diplomat. Maruf Raza continues to be with us, Group Consulting Editor. Maruf, I'm going to come to you first. We're also joining us, in fact, at the moment is Professor Swan Singh, who's the chairperson of the Center for International Politics of Organization and Disarmament at JNU. Maruf, coming to you first. These talks that are underway, there are different views coming in as to what these talks are really for. There are those from Ukraine, and a Ukrainian journalist we were speaking to a short while earlier said this perhaps could just be a tactic of Russia to perhaps regroup and perhaps once again re-strategize as far as its forces are concerned, because they've been taken aback by the kind of forcing and the pushback that they've seen from Ukraine in coming days. Or do you see this as a genuine attempt at perhaps trying to broker some kind of peace? And what's a possible solution that would be a face saver for both sides, in your view?
Yeah, Madhav, that's a very important question. I spoke about it earlier in the day. Whenever there are attempts at talks in conflicts, the first thing to understand is that the first sitting in talks itself will not solve all the issues. So there might have to be many rounds of talks before some kind of an arrangement comes about, which is acceptable to both sides and the international community. So I expect this to go on for a few days. Second thing is that talks allow, if there is a lull in battle, it allows 3 things to happen. Both sides to regroup, replenish, the civilians to hopefully get out of war-torn areas, and both sides gauge what is the maximalist and minimalist positions of either side. The compromise solution I see that could eventually emerge, and this is what I'm saying as a kind of a modest compromise solution, would be that where all Russia has moved in, it might continue to retain influence in those areas as a kind of autonomous area or Russia-dominate areas. Ukraine, if you look at the map, is divided by a major river system right through it from north to south. So that makes it 40% of Ukraine in the east and about 60% on the west.
Right.
And it might just be that they might look for a kind of Germany type of solution, which will be Russian influenced and NATO Western influenced. 2 other quick points I want to make, Madhav.
Yeah.
One is that these evacuation efforts, though ministers going to locations looks good for optics, they can also encumber the embassies with their own ideas and requirements, which logistically stretches the embassy staff, which are already stretched. And the students wishing to leave the location, there is a good idea that was thrown up 2 days ago on Times Now's News Hour by Ambassador Fabian, which said that we are not at all looking at the Russia evacuation route, because we still have good ties with Russia. So those that are stuck on the eastern stretches of Ukraine should be looking at that. And the point that you mentioned, that the point that you mentioned about Russia alleging others coming in from European countries to help the fighting, there is always the possibility of regular army reserve with a lot of military experience coming in to assist fighting
Maruf,
there.
let me quickly bring in other guests as well, because we have very limited time. Mr. Devare, I want you to come in and share with us your thoughts on what India's strategy should be. In fact, a few days ago, we were told that there could be a possibility of flights to Kharkiv, but with the intense fighting over there, is this a real possibility that India can explore from its embassy there in Moscow as well?
Yeah, Kharkiv is not possible. Kharkiv is almost on the border of Russia and Ukraine. In fact, Kiev is also very close to the border in the north side. The whole eastern area, therefore, is not accessible. So we'll have to go through this western route. But if the railways system...
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but the Ukrainian ambassador is speaking in the national capital. We'll have to cut across live to that.
Please pray. Thank you.
All right, so that was the Ukrainian ambassador. We will try and replay what he just said a few seconds ago. But yes, Mr. Devare, what is really a practical possibility given the kind of fighting that we're seeing? Is a ceasefire at all a possibility? Of course, it all depends on the outcome of those talks. But is that at all something that is likely in the coming days?
I think the first round will be basically preparatory. Both sides will put their positions in front. Ukraine has already talked of ceasefire and withdrawal of Russian troops. Both are not likely to be immediately agreeable. Russians have not stated their stand, but they are not like to relent on their demands. The Russians did not, in my view, expect this kind of resistance from Ukraine, both from civilians as well as the military. And therefore, I think they also feel that there is a lot of interference from outside. Weapons are coming into Ukraine. And therefore, an opportunity to somehow find an exit route in this could be also useful. They were looking for clearly a major city to fall, like either Kharkiv or Kiev, but even Odessa. But I think that has not been possible. So I think maybe in the second round, some kind of ceasefire may be agreeable. But I think what Mr. Raza was mentioning earlier, that 40%...
I will request you, Mr. Devare, to just hold on to your thoughts, as well as Professor Swan and Maruf. I want to go across to my colleague Jonathan, who's joining us live from Ukraine. Jonathan, take us through where you are at the moment. We are seeing citizens come out and quickly engage in shopping after several days of fighting. What's happening around you? Can you just point your cameras across the road and show us what's happening where you are?
Yes, I'm in the western city of Lviv, which is the principal occupation center in western Ukraine, and have a look around you now. I mean, the impression one would get is a city pretty much operating as normal, at least superficially. But look, what you got to understand is that everyone here is on really high alert at the moment. I've had all sorts of shenanigans today. I nearly got arrested by the secret police. There is an enormous amount of tension here at the moment. So I was just chatting to my fixer earlier today. You know, he's been offered weapons by the Ukrainian authorities. He's debating whether to, take up arms. But the reality of the matter is, look, we're looking at a relatively modern, civilized, semi-European city here.
All right, Jonathan.
But everyone here.
Jonathan, I'm just going to come in over here and wish you very safe travels. We certainly hope that you stay out of harm's way in every which way possible. Thank you so much for joining us with that update. I'm going to have to slip into a quick break. We're going to continue tracking this developing story on the other side. With us, in fact, our correspondent in Lviv, Jonathan Gilbert. Jonathan, what are your sources in the government or those around you telling you about how long this kind of a situation is expected to last? Is it going to be just a day? Is there a possibility even of a longer ceasefire following the talks between Russia and Ukraine? What are the likely possibilities?
There are so many options, so many variables under consideration at the moment. It's an impossible question to answer. There's no question now, I think, 4 or 5 days in, that the Russian so-called blitzkrieg has not gone according to plan by any account. So we're betting in now, aren't we? We're betting in for what may be a very long-term wartime scenario. The people around me here just go about their lives as normal. But as I was saying earlier, there's a very palpable sense of tension in the air. The Ukrainian government has been issuing weapons to civilians, and it's just impossible to imagine. But look around me now. This is sort of a relatively normal scenario, but I just keep envisioning tanks rolling up these boulevards, and suddenly the situation could change almost in an instant, almost in a heartbeat.
Well,
and
absolutely.
I think everyone
the
here...
situation could change any time, as you rightly mentioned there, Jonathan. Certainly, of course, we hope that you stay safe and travel safe. We're going to slip into a very quick break. We'll be continuing with more news and updates coming up on the other side.